Do you remember what it was like to be in middle school? Maybe you were lucky enough to bask in the glory of being one of the cool kids, the in crowd. Everybody knew everything about you and you felt a buzz of excitement every time you entered the room. Being idolized could be like a drug, and maintaining your position on top required a willingness to do whatever it took, even if that meant tearing other kids down in front of everybody else to establish your dominance and keep them in their place. But what if you were the kid being terrorized? Waking up with a stone in your stomach each school day because you were so unsure of what fresh hell the day had in store for you. Now imagine that not only are you being tormented every single day for simply existing in a way that pisses off the popular crowd, but you're a general anomaly. You are the chubby, unattractive, quote-unquote brown kid in a school run by the white kids. You're being suffocated by the relentless bullying for things that you can't control. How do you make them stop? Do you beat them or die trying? Hello all, and welcome to Creeps and Creeps. I'm your host, Cece Delaney, and today we are going to be discussing the persistent bullying and subsequent violent murder of Reena Virk. But first, if you're new here, welcome. I hope that by the end of this episode, you like the content enough to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you stream your podcasts, and are compelled to leave a like or review. I'm trying to build a communicative, creepy crew around these parts, so any questions, comments, concerns, they're all welcome and encouraged in the comment section. Be that on YouTube or the related Instagram post at Creeps and Creeps on Instagram. Now let's get started. Reena Virk was born on March 10, 1983, in the quiet, middle-class suburban area of Saanich, British Columbia, in the suburb of View Royal, a predominantly white, upper-class neighborhood, and was the eldest of 3 children. Her father was an immigrant from India. Meanwhile, her mother was born and raised in Canada by 2 Indian immigrant parents as a Jehovah's Witness. Despite having quite a large, close-knit family in the local South Asian community of just about 3,000, Reena Virk's immediate family stood out as a minority within a minority since they were Jehovah's Witnesses. Meanwhile, the majority of the community, including her other family, practiced Sikhism and Hinduism, so this already started Reena off on a bad foot in terms of popularity, and don't get me started on the racial discrimination in the area. When Reena was late in elementary school and prepping for her middle school career, her parents noticed a major shift in her attitude. They saw their once sweet daughter morphing into a rebellious, angry preteen who would go out of her way to pick fights at home, and suspected that Reena may be showing early signs of depression once they learned that Reena was being viciously bullied at school, at such a young age too. Her parents took it upon themselves to try and help their daughter, and in May of 1994, the family moved. Reena transferred to Burnside Elementary School, where for a short while, Reena flourished. She was breaking out of her shell, she was making friends, she was gaining confidence, but like I said, it was short-lived, and one friend randomly shunned Reena, and the bullying picked up with force. A major milestone for Reena came when she graduated elementary school and entered into her high school career in May of 1996. By August, she was officially a middle school student at Colquitt's Middle School. Despite starting at a new school, she was still horribly insecure and did whatever it took to try and boost her social standing. She made a small group of friends with the quote-unquote cool kids and began staying out past their curfews and drinking and smoking weed, pretty much the stereotypical rebellious teenager. Reena was still on her bullshit at home and becoming a little menace to her family and trying to further herself from the religious, more straight-edge family dynamic that she was experiencing within the home, which her family did not love. They obviously disapproved of Reena's choice in friends, and her father specifically was convinced that his daughter was acting like this because, you really are the sum of the 7 people that you surround yourself with. Or as he put it, based on one of his scripture-based lectures to Reena, quote, "Bad associations spoil useful habits," unquote. At about 5 minutes into the story, things are going to get kind of murky, especially depending on who you talk to. It was clear to her parents that the strict household was minimizing Reena's coolness, according to her, and she decided that enough was enough and she needed to take action. I'm not going to play the blame the victim game around here and assume that I know for 100% fact that I know what happened in the Virk household. That being said, there were multiple reports that Reena had had a tendency to lie at this time, as evidenced by the fact that she was actively on a warpath in the home to be cool. And it was reported that she was told by a friend that there was a fail-safe way to get out from under the oppressive thumb of her parents. Lie. Again, allegedly. The story goes that in 1996, when Reena was just 13, she told the police that she was being abused, that way she could get into the foster system. She reported her parents for physical abuse, and at the time, there wasn't enough evidence to support this, so no charges were pressed, but they took her seriously enough to pull her from the home, which had later ramifications as far as the Virk opinion goes, because they feel that this in and of itself was a massive failing on the part of the Canadian justice system because there was no evidence. So they felt there was no reason for them to even take Reena. But they did, and they placed her with her grandparents for a few months. While she was out of her parents' house, she claimed that her father was sexually abusing her. I speculate that this is to avoid having to go back home, but that's just my opinion. And this accusation resulted in her father Manjit's arrest in 1997. He was devastated and frazzled, like, why would my kid ever say that? He got put into jail while awaiting arraignment, but fortunately Reena came clean. Air quotes again because we can't confirm or deny anything. I just wanted to report all sides. But she came clean and admitted to police that she lied about the abuse. Manjit's charges were cleared and he was good to go legally. Emotionally, though, he was not okay, because that's a big thing to put your family through. In fact, when he wrote his book called Reena, A Father's Story, he wrote, quote, "I now believe Reena manipulated social workers and family alike. It was killing me that no one believed us and everyone seemed to accept Reena's story," unquote. I'd like to do a little sidebar here and just pause and emphasize the fact that she was 13 going on 14 at this point. She was in junior high. She had no idea the ramifications of abuse allegations or how impactful her rebellion could be with her family. So let's just try to keep that in mind as we move forward. Like, I understand it's frustrating to listen to. Like, why is this kid dragging her family like this? But she was relentlessly bullied. I don't condone her behavior, but I also don't want to start some witch hunt toward this child who was just trying to do what she felt would earn her some brownie points with the 1% douchebags. Now, Reena did not have a blast at her grandparents like she had anticipated and was quoted as saying that she felt uncomfortable, but I could not figure out why. And she was finally sent into the foster care system like she wanted. Again, that was not the dream that she thought it would be, and she quickly realized that it was just like home with the same rules and boundaries and curfews, but with exponentially less love and comfort. At this time in the 90s, gang culture was kind of in its peak. There were a lot of teenagers who were trying to emulate the street vibe and gangs and Bloods and Crips and all of that. Like, it was really prevalent at this time, and that extended into the foster home that Reena lived in. And she fell into a group of wannabe gangsters and really ramped up her rebellion. She began smoking consistently, both cigarettes and marijuana, and talking about gangs, and even told people she was in a gang. Once the glam of being in the system wore off, she decided that she wanted to pack her bags, apologize to her parents, say oopsies, and move back home. This didn't really last long. She decided that she wanted to get out of her parents' house again and left to stay in a youth shelter, and after that was placed back in the government's care into another foster home. Clearly, things were coming to a head at this point. She was lashing out at everything and everyone who she deemed as uncool and just wanted to finally be accepted by her peers, as do most preteens. So when the invitation to party with her quote-unquote friends, the cool kids, came along, she took it and ran with it. On November 14th, 1997, Reena was still in a foster home, but she was allowed to spend the night with her parents, like kind of weekend visit type things, and was just leaving her foster home when she got a call from one of her friends who has remained nameless throughout most of this case. Like, a lot of these kids, because the Youth Criminal Justice Act in Canada were all just initials for a really long time. It's kind of hard to give specifics on names outside of two very specific dickheads we're going to talk about in a little while. Just be aware that a lot of this is going to be kind of vague moving forward, so it's just going to be a lot of,
"A girl called, this girl did this,
I'm sorry? Blame the youth criminal justice system in Canada. I'm sorry. So Reena gets this call as she's leaving. Her friend is like, hey, do you want to come out and party with us? We're going to go hang out behind this school and smoke and drink and yada, yada, yada. And at first, Reena was really hesitant. Yes, these girls were her friends, but there had been a lot of animosity in the group lately. According to a documentary on the case by Real Stories, rumors had started in her foster home that Reena had stolen one of her roommates / bullies / friends / aggressors' address books and called all of the friends in that book to tell them that her roommate had AIDS and other STDs. Another rumor, according to the documentary, was that Reena had seduced and possibly had sex with another one of her roommate's boyfriends. There were also rumors that it was just a crush, but it got out and everyone lost their marbles about it, so choose your own adventure. But leading up to this, unbeknownst to Reena, the girls had been talking behind her back, both of her roommates as well as one of the school friends, and they were plotting revenge. They were not taking any of this lightly. After having gotten this invitation, Reena calls up her mom to tell her the plan to go to the party because, again, she's supposed to be going to her parents' house that night. And her mom echoed Reena's initial concerns. She was like, they're super mean to you. Don't go. I don't think this is a good idea. I don't get a good feeling. But Reena landed on the idea that this could be a plan to just bury the hatchet and get their friendship back on track. And Reena ultimately decided that she wanted to go to the party with her friends. At around 10:30 p.m., behind the school, the police found the teens and they broke up this party, which was only really a minor inconvenience for a second until the group remembered Craigflower Bridge in Victoria, British Columbia. All of the cool kids partied under the bridge every single weekend anyway, so it's not like it's a lame or heavily monitored area. Because Reena was still a ward of the state and it was getting close to her 11 p.m. curfew, she called her parents at 10:40 just to basically be like, hey, I'm walking home, I'll be home in a few. I should be home before curfew though. However, her parents were completely unaware that this is the last time that they would hear their oldest daughter's voice. Now, for a little while, everything was going to plan under the bridge. The teens, ranging from 13 to 16, were drinking, smoking weed, hanging out, having their little impromptu kickback under the bridge. Things were pretty mellow until several of the girls, known in the media in the future as the Shoreline Six, which they probably fucking loved since they wanted to be in a gang so bad, they got it in their heads to jump on suspecting Reena. It was rumored that this was already a plan because, like I said, they kind of had it in for Reena at this point anyway. Other people were like, no, it was just a random idea, so do with that what you will. But there was another account that also said that Reena was under the bridge with all of her friends, just hanging out, when randomly another girl from the group just showed up and Reena panicked. She sees her and she's like, oh shit, this isn't actually a hangout. They're about to beat me up. I gotta go. But regardless of what happened, unfortunately, Reena was not quick enough to outrun these kids who descended on her like wolves and just immediately started beating the crap out of Reena. Reena was absolutely brutalized by 6 girls named Nicole Cook, Nicole Patterson, Missy Grace Pleach, Courtney Keith, Gail Ooms, Kelly Marie Ellard, and one guy, Warren Glowatski, who I didn't realize he didn't know Reena or Kelly prior to this, allegedly. Actually, now would probably be a good time to pivot a little bit and talk about the 2 main perpetrators in this case, who refused to leave well enough alone after Reena was able to escape Warren and Kelly. So Warren Paul Glowatski was born April 26, 1981 in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. Life was not very easy for Warren growing up, and his parents moved him around a lot, making it difficult for him to establish roots in any one place. Eventually, his parents got a divorce, resulting in Warren never seeing his alcoholic mom again, and his dad moved to Nanaimo, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island in 1996. Just one short year later, they settled in a trailer home near the southern tip of the island in Saanich. It would only take 1 year for his dad to remarry a woman he met in Las Vegas, Nevada, and ended up moving to California, but Warren was really tired of moving at this point and convinced his dad to just ditch him in Canada in his trailer, and Warren ended up getting supported by his father with money that he would just send over. Warren was also obsessed with gangs, specifically the Crips, and just LA gang culture at the time, and started his own gang, which he called the Crip Mafia Cartel. Super original, Warren, where he made his lackeys wear blue and he wore all white. There's a lot less to talk about with Kelly Marie Ellard, but what I could find is a little alarming. She was born August 9th, 1982, and according to the book based on this, Under the Bridge by Rebecca Godfrey, Kelly was described to be a sociopathic and violent preteen who lacked a father figure in her life. Some described her as just an ordinary sweet girl who loved animals and was really good with children. However, in stark contrast, she once set another girl's hair on fire and was caught holding a knife to a classmate's throat. Not that any of these childhood traumas exonerate these hideous teenagers from their actions. Now we're gonna head back to the main timeline, and at this point, tensions were at a boiling point, and the attack was horrific. There was so much pent-up rage, teenage hormones, and just ruthless humans in general, and they went to town on poor Reena, with one girl stubbing her cigarette out on Reena's forehead where a bindi would generally go. This was actually seen as some sort of racial move because Reena was South Asian and they stubbed it in a very specific spot on her forehead, but it was never fully confirmed. Just didn't look good. The group beat the ever-living shit out of Reena, with one girl randomly The group beat the ever-living shit out of Reena when one girl randomly decided that enough was enough and called a ceasefire, for really no provocation it seems. Reena picked herself up, ditched her belongings, and got the hell out of there as quickly as she could, with her body just barely functioning enough to get her up and moving. Once the gang had rifled through Reena's stuff and taken what they wanted, they just abandoned everything else, including Reena's diary, and decided to part ways and go home as if literally nothing had happened. All except the aforementioned monsters, Warren and Kelly. According to multiple witness testimonies, Kelly broke away from the group and convinced her new bestie Warren to come with her, and they hunted down Reena, who was already barely clinging to consciousness and was crossing over the bridge to try and get home and get help. They testified that they only wanted to ensure that Reena didn't quote-unquote rat them out, but their vicious continued attack made it clear that they really did have more insidious motives in mind. Warren and Kelly grabbed Reena off of the bridge and dragged her back to the other side of the bridge and continued the attack with renewed hatred. They beat her until she stumbled and fell, and then continued by stomping and kicking the 14-year-old girl's body. This is a little graphic, so I'm sorry, but later autopsies showed that the attack was so violent that the bruising went so deep as to damage her internal organs and was so severe that the medical examiner could only liken it to being ran over by a car. According to a witness testimony, Kelly later bragged that she had smashed Reena's head into a local tree during the attack and even went as far to point out the tree where it stood. This next part is very much he said, she said. I'm a teen and I don't want to get caught for having murdered someone, but according to Kelly, once Reena passed out, she grabbed one foot and made Warren grab the other, and they dragged Reena to the gorge waterway. Warren testified that once at the shoreline, he noticed Reena's jeans had gotten dragged down below her butt during the move, and they just decided to take them off along with her underwear and her jacket and her shoes, but decided to leave on Reena's shirt. This would later lead to speculation of sexual assault, but it was never confirmed by DNA analysis, because once they got done attacking Reena, they put her in the river and just let her go. So the water washed away a lot of potential evidence. According to Warren, Kelly, all on her own, dragged Reena's body into the water and shoved her head down, waiting for several minutes until she was sure that Reena was dead, and there was red foam floating around her face, according to Warren. Later autopsy would also prove that the cause of death was likely from drowning, because they found gravel in Reena's lungs, which indicated that she was still alive during the drowning portion, and it actually inhaled a lot of debris off of the riverbed floor. Like I said, from here, Kelly and Warren just let her body go and float down the inlet, washed their hands of things, and went their separate ways. Again, like nothing ever happened. Don't forget, Warren is still living alone in his trailer, and by the time he got home, his current girlfriend and another friend were just hanging out there. They noticed that Warren had what looked like blood on his jeans, just like a small quarter or dime size, and he promptly bleached it and then then threw it in the wash. Kelly was living with her middle-class family at the time, and cool as a little cucumber, went home, showered, and went to bed. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but we're gonna get a little more into it now. Do you remember how I said that Reena was supposed to be at home for the weekend to hang out with her family? So obviously she never showed up for curfew, and her mom was panicking, but by the next morning, when Reena still wasn't home, she was like, okay, well, enough is enough, and called the police. Unfortunately, because Reena had a record of not only running away, but lying to authorities, it wasn't really taken seriously at all. During one interview, it was stated that it wasn't rare for a foster child to go missing on a Friday night and show up on a Monday, ready for school like nothing ever happened. They made the Virks wait it out, and when Reena still wasn't home by Monday, they really still weren't motivated to start the search. It took a full week until police got to work honing in on potential suspects, despite the rumors swirling around from both students and teachers. Now, as to why the teachers decided not to make any reports is really as unclear to me as it could be to you. My thought is that it could have added some validity to the rumors and maybe spurred on investigators, but regardless, they stayed silent and gossiped amongst themselves and the students instead. Despite the agreement for everybody that attacked Reena to stay quiet, their impulsive idiot teenage squishy brains couldn't handle all of the stress of keeping things quiet, and they immediately started blabbing to everybody, bragging to friends about what they did. Now, some of the girls involved in the initial assault were bragging about breaking Reena's nose and laughing about how they all beat the shit out of her and just laughed it off, trying to use this to add to their street cred. Authorities finally descended on the school and were plagued with different stories and rumors. For example, some students were like, oh yeah, I saw Reena all week. What are you talking about? She was at the Wawa down the road. And others were like, no, she's for sure dead because I just listened to like 6 people brag about it. So it was really confusing. Regardless, the police were able to find the names of the 7 perpetrators and drag their little butts down to the police station. And on November 21st, 1997, Warren and Kelly were both arrested and charged with the murder and aggravated assault. The remaining Shoreline 6 girls faced aggravated assault charges and were all also taken into the police station at the same time, where the cops were horrified to observe that the girls were just like laughing with each other and being really nonchalant in the lobby while waiting for their interrogations. It didn't take long for one of the unnamed Shoreline 6 to crumble and point to Kelly and Warren as the true killers. Meanwhile, her and the rest of the Shoreline 6 confessed to their involvement in the initial attack, but they were adamant, like, we did not murder her. That wasn't us. That was all Warren and Kelly. She also shared where the initial attack took place, and that started the search effort around the bridge and the surrounding waterways. At this point, police weren't really hopeful that they were going to find Reena alive and were looking to recover the body, not necessarily a live girl, which meant that they brought in the dive team in order to scour the murky water. Keep in mind, the water in this area was very mucky, easy to get stuck in, and also silty, and so it made visibility incredibly difficult. So the divers were on really high alert. On day 1, their hopes were lifted just a little bit when Reena's underwear were found stuck in the muck, and they bagged them with the surrounding water in order to attempt to preserve the evidence and sent them off for testing. And it was really quickly followed up by another break when they recovered her jeans. They were feeling really optimistic at this point, and they chugged on for the rest of the day, hoping to recover her body. Unfortunately, their luck seemed to have run out really quick, and divers were unable to locate her body that same day. However, the next day, they doubled down on their efforts and brought in the police helicopter team, as well as the dive team and a ground team. Some sources, like that documentary that I was referring to earlier, claim that it was the air team who were able to find her, saying that it was hard for the divers to see, but then there were other reports that said that it was the ground team who spotted her in the brush, but regardless, they both were correct in saying that they found Reena's body in the brush upstream, which really surprised everybody because they were having a hard time finding her because they were following the natural waterway downstream, but somehow her body got dragged up and then stuck in brush, and that's just where she stayed until she was able to be recovered. On November 22nd, an autopsy was performed and the extent of her damage was announced. In the end, an autopsy was performed and the extent of her damage was finally announced. In the end, her cause of death was officially drowning, but the coroner noted that even if she hadn't drowned, she probably wouldn't have survived her brain injuries from the attack. In February 1998, 3 of the Shoreline 6 girls admitted their guilt in the initial assault, assault, resulting in bodily harm charges. The remaining 3 girls underwent trial because they refused to come clean and were found guilty of the same offense. They all received different sentences, ranging from a 60-day conditional sentence to 1 year in jail, with one of the girls having later committed suicide, and she, I believe, was the one who got the 60-day conditional because she could not handle the stress of being in prison and was on suicide watch the entire time. I thought that they just put people in straitjackets when they did that, but I'm not a youth in Canada, so I don't know. So Canadian youths, first off, why are you listening to this? Second off, tell me. Or anyone who knows the youth criminal justice system, is that common that they wouldn't just put you on like a suicide watch solitary confinement situation? They would just ship you off home and be like, please don't kill yourself? I need to know. I'm real curious about it. Fast forward, in April of 1999, the trial for Warren commenced, and in June, he was convicted of second-degree murder, leading to a life sentence. Keep in mind, literally everyone in this case was a minor, and so because of this, he became eligible for parole after serving just 7 years. While he was serving his prison sentence, he came to realize that he had Métis heritage, which belonged to the First Nations group in Canada, and this revelation allowed him to involve tribal elders from his community in his parole proceedings. As part of the restorative justice process, he engaged in meetings with Reena's family and tried to just make amends with them, essentially. In July of 2006, he was granted unescorted temporary absences from prison, and ultimately, in June of 2010, he was released on full parole. Reena's family, surprisingly to me, didn't oppose his parole application because he genuinely seemed to be remorseful for his actions. That is something that I noticed during all my research. They seem like a very forgiving family, which gives me goosebumps. I have goosebumps right now even thinking about it. Like, they seem so kind. Unfortunately for everybody, Kelly's trial and conviction was not so seamless. At the age of just 15, Kelly Ellard, now known as Kelly Marie Sim, because she was able to get married and change her last name, was implicated in Reena's murder, and her lawyer sought to have her case tried in youth court, but the Supreme Court of Canada denied the request due to the severity of the crime and perceived lack of remorse. To this day, that still holds true. She still seems very blasé about everything. Initially convicted of second-degree murder in March 2000, her conviction was overturned in February 2003 on the grounds of an unfair trial. If you ever get the chance, I highly recommend looking into this court case because it was messy. After serving just 18 months of her life sentence, Kelly was released on bail pending her appeal. And again, we're back in February 2003. I know I got a little tangential there, so I thought I'd remind us all of the timeline. However, a month later, she was charged with assault, causing bodily harm for attacking a 58-year-old woman in Vancouver Park, and her bail was, thank God, revoked, and she was returned to prison by March 2004. In June 2004, Kelly faced a new trial, this time for Reena. Witnesses came forward alleging that Kelly had boasted about Reena's murder, and her co-accused, Warren, claimed to have witnessed Kelly drown Reena, again taking zero responsibility for that chunk, while Kelly's lawyer accused Warren of lying during his statements to the police and trial, which is something else that's really interesting about the court documents because they call a lot of the witnesses out and basically are like, oh, well, it's really interesting that your statements changed between now and your initial interviews and the first trial, so you want to go ahead and explain that? To be fair, they are all children who were witnesses, so, you know, I don't think that really helped their cause. During her trial, Kelly admitted to punching Reena out of fear for her friend's safety, but denied committing the murder. She shifted the blame onto Warren and 2 other of the girls who were there, and showed absolutely zero remorse for her actions or provided a clear motive for the attack for the family. After 5 days of deliberation, the jury failed to reach a verdict and resulted in a mistrial, which was declared in July of 2004. A new trial for Kelly commenced in February of 2005, with Warren again as the key witness. Like, he really showed up for the Virk family and consistently tried to get Kelly put away as well. So I will give him that. He does seem a lot more remorseful, obviously, because he got out. Warren once again testified that he and Kelly beat Reena and left her lifeless in the water. On April 12th, 2005, Kelly was convicted of second-degree murder for her second time and received a life sentence with 0 parole eligibility for 7 years, again, because of being a minor at the time. However, the legal battles continued. In September 2008, Kelly's second-degree murder conviction was overturned by the British Columbia Court of Appeal due to incorrect instructions given by the judge during her third third trial. The Supreme Court of Canada upheld her conviction in June of 2009, thank God, and finally brought an end to this nightmare for Reena's family. Kelly was granted day parole in 2017 and later received overnight rights and extended day parole in 2019. On July 14, 2021, the Parole Board of Canada approved her continued day parole. This decision garnered renewed media attention given that she had received a life sentence but spent a significant portion of it on day parole. So she was basically going home after work, home being prison. Like, oh no, your bed's really uncomfy and people will yell at you a lot. Okay, you still get to spend your day out. What the hell? Having changed her name and started a family with her spouse while on day parole, Kelly has abided by the conditions of her release, which include abstaining from drugs and alcohol and avoiding contact with the Virk family. Yeah, okay, well that's the least you can do. Also, sorry, I'm getting really heated at this point because what the hell, Canada? The motive behind the murder of Reena Virk by this group of teenagers remains a question. Revenge is believed to be the possible motive, but with accusations that Reena had stolen a phone book and spread rumors, as well as anger over her alleged involvement with another girl's boyfriend, which still does not warrant murder. Like I talked about a little bit earlier, in the year 2000, Reena's parents filed a lawsuit against not only the involved teens, but the British Columbia government because they were like, hey, why didn't you watch our kid better? What the hell? And her father actually expressed his belief that holding the Canadian justice system accountable was a way to make them responsible for their actions because he felt like society often failed to do that, which I can't say I disagree. In conclusion, there's just so much information about this case, but obviously since we don't have the full next week to just sit around and talk about this, we're gonna have to end it here. The brutal murder of Reena Virk was a harrowing reminder for not only the public servants who have taken an oath to uphold the law, protect, and serve, but the teens who bring on such terrifying consequences from using their underdeveloped squishy brains. I think we all just need to take this as a reminder to check on your kids, and if you're foster parents, please God, try to remember that, yeah, they can be the quote-unquote troubled youth of society, but they're still youth. Like, they need your guidance and help, arguably more than those of us lucky enough to have grown up in a stable nuclear household. And for everybody else, it takes a village. Friends, look out for one another. If you see something, say something, and please God, just stay as safe as you can. If you were interested in this particular case and want me to cover a specific one, please leave it in the comments on YouTube or on the related Instagram post at Creeps and Creeps on Instagram. I read all of my comments, the good, the bad, and the constructive, so please really don't be afraid to voice your opinions. And that being said, also, just don't be dickheads to each other in the comments. If you're streaming this as a podcast, please consider throwing a rating my way, with 5 stars being the most helpful, and subscribing to the show. You can email me directly at creepsx2@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram at creepsandcreeps if you want to suggest a case or just shoot the shit. I'm always there and I'm always ready to make a friend. If you're ever curious about my sources, they'll be linked in the show notes so you can sift through them if you want, and I'm telling you, there are a ton connected to this case, so like, go nuts, you're gonna be here for a few days. Until next time, keep those little noodles on a swivel and please try to stay safe. Bye!